so there's this kind of like, first, be a disciple to something bigger, do no harm, right? To include doing no harm to yourself. And then first, discipline yourself to do the healthy things and fill up your life with that, fill up your mind. I call that feeding the courage wolf with the healthy things.
Welcome to the Matt Phillips Podcast. I am Matt Phillips, your sales leadership coach, mental toughness expert, and founder of Matt Phillips Coaching. Well, Mark, welcome to the show. So excited to have you for round number 2. It's been a couple of years, but welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here, man. It's been 4 or 5 years, I think.
Yes.
Right? It's great to see you.
Time flies, COVID in the middle.
Yeah, I can barely remember pre-COVID.
I know.
That's so funny.
Our new reality.
Remember back then?
Yes.
What we were kind of saying.
Yeah, I kind of joke with my kids sometimes. I feel like I'm at that point in my stage of my life where I'm like, back when I was a kid, I used to, walk uphill both ways and
exactly
3 feet of snow to school every day and
carry 8 pounds of water.
Geez, yeah. Not that old, but no. So I was super excited to have you back, and yeah, we were spitballing right before I hit record too, and we were joking about I should have just hit record then and started the podcast because we were talking Zen and getting into business and life and all that stuff. But super excited to have you back. And I know you've had some shifts and changes in kind of what you're doing. And I just love hearing from you every time and learning from you. So I've got some questions that I want to dive into today that honestly, a couple of them are very selfish for me. And I think listeners will also benefit from some of these things as well. But before we get to some of those questions, I like to kick these off with a question I ask everyone, and it is this: who is one leader, the best leader that you've had, and how did he or she influence how you show up and how you lead today?
Yeah, I told you that's an easy one for me to answer, and it dives back into the Zen discussion. So we can start right at the center.
Yes.
So this man is the one who got me interested in leadership, and he was my martial arts master who also happened to be a Zen master. So I went to New York when I graduated from Colgate University in 1985. I got hired by Coopers and Lybrand. We probably told this story 5 years ago when we talked. But and so I was on this kind of journey following the drumbeat of my family, of my culture, all the conditioning of my 1960s, 70s, early 80s upbringing, upstate New York, Colgate University, blah, blah, blah. Family business that had 100-year-old manufacturing history. And, I was being groomed to take that over or go down to Wall Street and make a shit ton of money.
Yes.
And so what saved my ass was that I was a competitive athlete, like you. And so I was used to training. I didn't see myself the same as those pasty, puffy people I saw in those suits. Good people, mind you, nothing wrong with them, but I was not going to be like that. Yes. And so I trained every morning, ran 6 miles or so, stretched afterward, did a little journaling. And then I trained at lunch, went to the gym, did, what we now know as a high intensity interval workout. I was like I would go to the gym and I'd be like a dog peeing on different pieces of equipment. And that was my sign to anyone else. Do not touch that. That is mine. And then I would spin like a Tasmanian devil as fast as I could through these different stations, just break this massive sweat.
Oh, I love that.
I would, 20, 30 minutes just cranking. And then I would go shower up, but I'd, sweat for like an hour and a half after that back at the office. And then I had this opportunity because Cooper, it was part of my program there was to work for Coopers, to become an auditor and then a consultant, because at Colgate, there were no accounting courses. So they hired liberal arts students, and it was part of a cohort with other schools, like top schools were involved in other firms. So the big 8 accounting firms were involved. And and so they hired from like Colgate, Williams, Amherst, Yale, Harvard, Brown, et cetera. So there's 75 of us going to NYU Stern School of Business, and that was to get ourselves initially a master's in accounting so that we could qualify to sit for the CPA exam. I know that's a lot. And I'm getting to the leader part, but this story is really interesting. Okay,
yes, so, I love this.
At least according to me.
Well, and as everyone will learn, the very first time you were on, our paths are so similar up to that point. Obviously, Navy SEALs, we don't have that in common.
Right.
But it was interesting because I was at Creighton University
Right.
and I was getting my finance international business degree, and Ernst and Young came, and it was a difference. There was a shortage of accountants, of auditors at that time. So they actually sent me to the University of Virginia to get my master's of accountancy. So,
oh, no kidding. Interesting.
Anyway,
yeah, there is a parallel there.
So many parallels. Anyway, keep going.
And I was a pretty unlikely CPA, fish out of water kind of thing. But, I put my green light go hat on, and I was like all motivated. I'm going to learn this stuff and get my MBA. I was going to get my master's, which I did, and then transferred in the MBA program to get my MBA in finance.
Yes.
At any rate, the whole point for that piece, that little segue was, NYU was down at the Old World Trade Center, and we would start classes at 7:30 at night. So Cooper's would let us off around 5, which was pretty unheard of actually for, public accounting consulting.
Yes.
And most of my peers would go home and have dinner and change and do some studying. And yours truly looked at that block of time and said, look at that. There's another training opportunity.
Mm.
And so I was thinking, what could I do here? Right. I want to move my body. Right. So while I was kind of having those thoughts over the first, month or so, when I was walking home one night, and I lived on 22nd Street. I was walking down 23rd Street, and I heard these noises coming out of the second floor of this building, like shouts, screams. At first I was like, what is going on? Is there like a fire or something? And I look up, and I'm standing under a sign that says World Sado Karate Headquarters. I'm like, oh, interesting. Like, that could be cool. That could be really interesting. And I didn't know much about the martial arts. My freshman roommate, a guy named Dave Bowman, had started studying Shotokan when I was at Colgate, and I was a swimmer. 4 years later, like, Dave was a black belt, and he had changed. Like, he started out as a snotty kid, and by the time he graduated, he was really poised, mature, and confident and quiet. And he was going off to Japan to continue his karate studies and teach English. And me, I was 4 years older. I drank a lot of beer, chased a lot of girls, but I wasn't different, much different. And so I always I pinned that right on my little mental notebook. Said there's something about that, what he did, which is different than what I did in terms of training. Like, he was training his mind. I was training just my body.
Yes. So
anyways, when I found myself standing under that sign, I was like, oh, I remembered Dave. And I said, this could be interesting. So I walked up to the second floor, and in the middle of the floor, leading a black belt class with like 60 students, black belts from first all the way to 6th degree black belt, was this like 5'4" Japanese guy, about 40 years old. He was a rock. And like, it looked like a boulder just sitting in the middle of the floor. Right. At the same time, this guy would he would move like a gazelle, and, just pounce over here to talk to this person and fly over there. And he had this demeanor that was different than anything I've ever seen before in my life, right? It was both incredibly stern and serious while simultaneously light and playful. Yeah. This guy was a master.
Yeah,
he was a master.
Well, it's the yin and yang, right?
He was a whole person. He had the hard and the soft wired and integrated. He could be like a badass. Like, I watched this guy a few months later in Madison Square Garden stand over 5 blocks of ice. Each block of ice was like 8 or 9 inches thick, with a little piece of wood between them, and they were stacked up. And he stood over it and calm, serene kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, you could barely see, he moved so fast, you could barely see it. It's like, and he stood back up, and all the ice had just gone split right down the middle. And he had hit it with his forehead.
With his forehead?
With his forehead.
Holy moly.
Yeah. His teacher was a renowned Japanese martial artist named Masayama. And Masayama was famous for cutting the horn off of a charging bull with his right hand. Kid you not. So here's my introduction to the martial arts, and is this man who completely defined leadership for me, and yet I didn't see that anywhere else. And so I was completely hooked. And he became my teacher. And so I started with the karate.
Yes.
Didn't even know he taught Zen. Didn't even know what Zen was. But a few months into it, I stayed to watch a black belt class on a Thursday night. And after the class was over, everyone's kind of shuffling out. and the lights are going down, but I saw a small group of people stick around, and they were taking these little wooden benches out of this corner, and a candle was being lit. And I asked one of the guys, I said, what are they doing? They said, oh, that's a Zen class. What's Zen? So you can go research it.
Right.
And I asked, can anyone join the class? Because they were all black belts. And the guy said, no, it's a black belt class, but you could always ask Mr. Nakamura. So I went to the library. The next day I got a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by a guy named Suzuki. I understood about 10% of it, but it was enough to intrigue me because it was talked all about development of the mind and the spirit, and
Yes.
Things like enlightenment, which I had never, growing up in upstate New York, like enlightenment wasn't discussed very often. Like never.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, it's same with me growing up. Wasn't discussed that much. So yes, or
It
at all.
wasn't something that was a conversation around the dinner table with my father screaming and throwing glasses and stuff like that. Well, that's a different story. So
It's for another episode.
that's for another episode. The episode on trauma recovery.
Exactly.
So I was hooked on that too. So I went to Mr. Nakamura next time I saw him in the white belt class afterwards. And I said, Kaicho was his like ceremonial name. Kaicho meant grandmaster. The Kaicho, I noticed you have a Zen class on Thursday nights. We'd really like to join that. And he's like, sure. Come on, just take it seriously. Yeah. So I joined as a like black belts, and then this little white belt sitting on his bench. I loved it. Now, most people fail with meditation because it's hard work, but I trusted him. And he had a process to follow. He started with his concentration training, and Zen is really largely a concentration practice. So I started training in Zen, and I began to develop the capacity to see how and why his leadership was so unique.
Yes.
And it was very motivating. And I'll kind of stop there with the story. It's very motivating for me because I recognized that, that there was a leader in me kind of desiring to come out, and I wasn't going to find it in public accounting. Right. It wasn't the right path for me to explore my leadership capacity. And so meditation really helped me uncover that as well, that I was meant to be on a different path.
Yes.
A warrior path. So if it weren't for Nakamura and meditation, I probably wouldn't have left Wall Street or, path I was on to join the Navy SEALs, because that opened my mind to a whole new way of thinking, being, acting. The meditation literally transformed how my mind worked, not my thought contents, but like the idea of metanoesis literally transformed my mind to where I could perceive more. I could be more aware. I could concentrate better.
Yes.
And also I could see the stories and the patterns that had been conditioned into me as what they were, just stories and patterns, but they weren't me. And so I was able to ask better questions. And those questions guided me into the SEALs.
So fascinating.
Isn't that interesting? So, it's probably for me, that Nakamura, an enlightened master, is my bellwether for leadership mastery, leadership acumen.
Yes.
And some of the qualities of that are absolute abject humility. Like we were talking about before, like I've meditated every day since then. And the Zen saying that you must tame the ego or kill the ego in order to, develop complete awareness or satori. I understand. I saw that in Nakamura, and after 30 years or 30 some odd years of training, like there's no mark left in me that needs to be special or noticed or put on a pedestal. Anything that I do really is done spontaneously and kind of through me.
Yes.
The ego really is just a bunch of ideas and concepts and conditioning, just like, the early conditioning that I saw that wasn't me. I wasn't meant to be a CPA. Well, the entire personality is that.
Yes. Yes.
It's just a set of ideas and conditioning and concepts, no different than like the idea of Texas is a concept. It's not real. I mean, it's real in your mind. And so Mark is real in my mind, but the idea of Mark is just an idea. So that's really what meditation taught me, like and it taught me about leadership, that the best leadership is one that is free of ego, and everything else flows from there. Because if you're free of ego, then your mind is clear to make, really good, spontaneous and creative decisions, unclouded by coulda, shoulda, wouldas, or regrets, or false expectations and fear.
Yes.
Also, your heart is really open, and so you lead with utmost compassion and inclusivity, and you strive to bring out the best in your team with disregard for how you're perceived, or your own reputation, or those things take care of themselves.
Yes.
Right? It's very different than what most people would consider their experience with a leader.
Well, absolutely. And so I want to talk about this, because this is such a huge thing, I think, with, we talked a little about the businesses we run, right? Where we have to be seen and heard. I mean, people are listening to this podcast right now. They listen to your podcast. You're sitting on a newsletter. Like, you're out there in front, and people want to hear from you and want to see you physically when you show up to events and things like that. Like, there's power in that. Going back to like the very first time you were on that second floor, noticing your instructor, like, it seemed like tell me if this is wrong, but my interpretation is like, because he had worked on like letting go of his ego, it was almost like his energy grew because you were so attracted to that. Not because he was dressed differently, but because of his movement and the power and that yin and yang almost. Is that the result of like your energy grows when the ego declines, or am I
think so? There's a great way to like look at this, is the ego is resistance to life. Or ego, said another way, ego is resistance to reality, or ego is resistance to what is. And what is what is present.
Yes.
And if you can train your mind to get out of the way, AKA tame the ego.
Yes.
And I mean by train your mind is train the content mind that perceives itself as this or that, which is the personality. So your mind, has a lot of, it's got a lot of power, right? And if you're completely merged up in your thoughts and your identity, you actually have very little power. I mean, you could still get things done, but you can get quite a bit done, but you're not acting out of your true source of power, right? You're letting your the ego's pushing into the universe with planning and cause and effect kind of thinking, right?
Yes.
Linear
thinking. Forceful thinking, yes.
Force, using David Hawkins' power verse. Yes. So that's force. Thank you.
Yep.
So the ego will act with force, and you can accomplish a lot with force, but often there's secondary and third, there's third level things that go bad or that trail you, right? So you can train your mind to move beyond the concepts and what the ego thinks of this and that, right, wrong, the dualistic sense of, reality to a broader sense of, source, witnessing reality. And so with a little work and accessing that witnessing awareness, then you move away from the thoughts. And now you can then curate the quality of those thoughts as well as the energy of those thoughts. Again, moving, you can look at your actions and your thoughts and say, you know what, those worked for that scenario, but they're not optimal for who I am now. We want to act from a place of power, and power is back to your point, is it's an emergent quality of source.
Yes.
Right? Of all that is. It is what is. Like everything is power and potential.
Yes.
And then we kind of work with that like as a piece of clay. But generally the ego squeezes that power through a very narrow aperture, right? And takes ownership of all the results. And so by taming that ego, taming that part of your mind that wants to grab onto and take ownership of everything, then it opens up the aperture to allow more of this life force source / energy through. And that's what you're talking about. So the master, whether it's Jesus as an ascended master or Master Nakamura as a martial arts master, is just letting a lot more light, love, beingness, presence to be experienced through the body and to be experienced, or through the body mind, and to be experienced by others in the presence of that individual.
Well, and I love this because I oftentimes try to take like spiritual concepts, right, and apply them to like, well, what does that look like in leadership? Like, I'm leading a team. This is what it looks like. And I have obviously my lens that I lead a team and a business and run a business. And I've, been in public accounting and working with big companies and all that stuff. So I've got that certain lens that I look through and try to translate some of these concepts, right? And then I work with a bunch of clients just like you. And so you're able to kind of compare and look at these things. And I often look at thing I've struggled with, like running a business. And I think sometimes in leadership, it's like, we have to be the man, we have to be the woman. We have to be the, like
the one with all the answers,
all the answers, right? People are looking to, and then on the flip side, we hear, and I talk about this, and so do you. It's like, but it's not about me. It's about them. Right. And that shift of focus to them. And maybe this is out of alignment, but I always look at that of like, when I choose to use your words, I kind of set my ego to the side for a minute, but I have to remind myself, it's not about me. How do I have it open my scope of view, let the ego go. To do that, I can service them better. I can give them more energy. I can shine more light into them. And that's why I try to look at it, like when we're talking about, like, it's not about you, it's about them. You have to start with yourself first though. Right. And have that come from that Zen place of the openness to do that.
Right. The two meta principles are mastery, self-mastery, and service. In the beginning, in the training phase, self-mastery precedes service. Otherwise, you're going to be serving from a contracted, limiting place. Oh. Now, it doesn't mean you don't serve like until you're a master, but the principle is like, you don't wake up in the morning and just rush out the door to go serve your clients. You take the time to master yourself as appropriate for, wherever you are in your stage of development.
Yes.
And so what does that mean? It just means you do your morning practice, right? You do your work, your mindfulness, your meditation, your breathing, your visualization, your whatever, right?
Yes.
And, I call that winning in the mind before you step foot onto the battleground. It's from a Sun Tzu quote, right? Victorious warriors first win in their mind and then go to war. All others go to war hoping to win, something to that effect.
Yes.
So you prepare your mind. That's part of the self-mastery practice, so that when you serve with awareness. You serve with an open heart. You serve with focus on others and not yourself. Now, the only other distinction I'll make is it doesn't mean that you're not important in that relationship, right? It's a co-creation, especially as a coach.
Yes.
You and the coach is there to unlock and bring out the best in each individual, whether it's a team, sports team or a corporate team, but also to unlock and bring out the best of the team in total. And you're part of that team.
Very true.
So you've got to recognize that this co-creation is happening moment to moment. And there's times when the leader is the limiting factor, because you're bringing your shadow to the game, right? You're bringing your childhood traumas, your unresolved issues, your regrets, your isms.
Yes.
Right. So you've got to be working on yourself while you're working with your clients or, students.
Yes.
And you're working on the team to bring out the best. It's a very multidimensional process of co-creation.
I wanted to take a quick break from the podcast to invite you to something very special that we're up to at Matt Phillips Coaching. It's what we call the High Performance Leadership Program. Now, we know that leading people can be challenging. It also can be extremely rewarding. And one thing that I found as you progress in leadership and want to take that next level, get that promotion, continue to move up the ladder, is you have to continually invest in yourself. And you have to set yourselves apart from other people. And you have to continue to not only grow as a leader, but you have to grow your mental toughness, your mindset,
because that is the one true differentiator. That's exactly why we built the High Performance Leadership Program, to come alongside you on a monthly basis, to give you the tools, training, and resources, and coaching with me to help you elevate your performance. So I invite you to head over to mattphillipscoaching.com/membership and join us today in the High Performance Leadership Program. Let's make your dreams and your career and your business a reality.
Well, I love that. We often hear too that, a lot of leaders, this is true of like entrepreneurs, this is true of business leaders. It doesn't really matter like what size of company you're leading or anything like that, where things are busy and something comes at a cost, right? So we have to sacrifice something if we're so busy. And so sometimes some people will sacrifice working out. So sacrifice eating right, sacrifice time with family, sacrifice some of these things in order to achieve that, right? Again, I think there's a give and take with everything. I'm curious, in order to keep that, just stay in that place and stay level and amidst the sometimes craziness of the day and all these sorts of things. But when you're talking to different leaders, like what advice do you give them to make sure, I'm not a big fan of like work-life balance, but maintaining like that kind of that balance in life where you can set the ego aside and be open more? Like what are some practices that you coach people on, teach people to either structure their day or something like tactically to make sure they're showing up the right way?
Busyness is a mental construct. So first of all, at the very objective kind of material level, everyone's too busy because it's part of our conditioning.
Yes.
And so when I work with clients, I say the first thing we got to do is declutter, right? Declutter your life from unnecessary commitments. We take on too many commitments. We think we have to do everything, or people ask us and we don't say no. Because we're taught that saying no means, you're not good enough, or you're sending a signal that you don't care. No, you do care, but it's not right for you. So learn to say no. And if you're entangled in things, do an honest assessment. 80-20 rule. It's usually the least important things take up 80% of your time.
True.
So start disengaging from all that stuff.
Yes.
Declutter. And then, there's relationships, that same thing, 80-20 rule, like relationships that are just drama queens and kings. They just suck all your energy. Now, if it's your, wife or son, you're not going to leave them or kick them out.
Right.
But, you can work on that through therapy and whatnot.
Yes.
But there are others in our lives who just like you just like scratch your head and you're like, why? Right? Why am I allowing this to? And so maybe you can draw a boundary around that, and say, okay, let's protect my time and energy from these people or this type of person. Oftentimes I do this in kind of reverse order, because people who are really busy tend to have cluttered lives in general. So I have them like declutter their garage and their closet and their, the trunk of their car and their bookshelves, right?
True.
Because that's a sign of your mind being too busy. And so start there, declutter, simplify. The master principle of the warriors is simplicity.
Yes.
But as Steve Jobs says, simple is not easy, but you can work at it. So that's kind of like the outer objective. Now, the practice is, the master level practice is, it starts with that morning routine that I talked about, where you win in your mind. And part of winning in your mind is to develop the capacity to go into your mind and to create permanent space between you and your thoughts. So there is a process to do this, right? It starts with physiological balance and control through fitness, exercise, nutrition, sleep, but then also built on that, a practice of breath control that puts you in a permanent state of balance, teetering between parasympathetic and sympathetic arousal.
Yes.
And so then when you go into your morning practice and you begin after some time and you begin, say, with box breathing, which is the practice that I developed and teach to the Navy SEALs, over time, your brain naturally falls into this, high alpha, low beta kind of brainwave state, and you get, very clear and concentrated. And so your mind is focused and calm. And so there's three skills built into that breathing practice. One is arousal control. That's that, fine balance between the parasympathetic and sympathetic. Every time you get triggered into sympathetic, stress response, you immediately bring it back into balance through calming breath, massaging that vagus nerve, etc. And then the second skill is attention control. Like, because in the practice, you're keeping your mind following the breath, like discreetly hooked to every stage of, every moment of that breath practice. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. You're training your mind to stay attentive to that. And then you're training your mind to notice when it starts to wander and has split attention or completely goes off the reservation.
Yes.
And you're training your mind to bring it back quicker and quicker. And you're training your mind to stay focused on that object of attention. In this case, the breathing pattern for longer and longer periods of time. So you got arousal control, you got attention control, and you got concentration, all bundled into one cool practice. Now,
amazing.
When the body is healthy and the mind has that stability from those, the arousal control, attention control, and concentration training, then we can move into the mindful awareness, right? This mindfulness or mindful awareness, where you begin to draw space or develop space between your sense of self, we call the witness, and your thoughts. That's an advanced practice. And 99.999% of people who jump right into mindfulness training fail miserably because they haven't done those first three preparatory practices.
Yes.
And their mind is unstable. They're bouncing all around because that's the way it's been trained. And that's the way, we continue to train it by bouncing it around from, email to social media to the latest bing, ding, ching on your phone, et cetera. So now this is getting back to your point, your question. When you develop this capacity through mindful awareness to move away from thoughts, you literally are creating in your mind a protective shield, right, between or around. And I ask my clients to kind of metaphorically and visually extend this bubble outside their body, so that regardless of whatever's happening out there, you are protected from it, because you see the thoughts arising. You don't have to engage with it. You don't have to react to it.
Yes.
You got inside this bubble, you got all the time in your world, not the world, but in your world, to pause, breathe, formulate the appropriate response, which might be nothing, and then act. Yes. By the way, that's an acronym I borrowed from the SEALs. Pause, breathe, think, and act, PBTA. But you do so from within this protected bubble of awareness, where you're not caught up in the thrashing, dynamic, frothy seas of the everyday thinking.
Love that.
It's a very powerful leadership skill, by the way, as you can imagine, right? Because you never are out of balance, right? No matter how busy you are,
yes,
you're always in this practice zone where you're inside this bubble. And the metaphor I use is like you are in the center and yes and no chase themselves around the circumference, and you just watch until you choose the yes that's right for you.
Love that visual.
Yeah.
Love that visual. I think it's so powerful. I think it's what we all need, right? Of starting from that place of control and pausing. And we all know we make better decisions when we take time to reflect and take time away, and whether it's, walking or breathing or something like that. But I love that practice of like starting that in the morning to train yourself. And then that just carries through throughout the entire day. Right.
And most people think that, metacognition or pausing and thinking about your thinking and journaling and like going back to the drawing board, it takes a lot of time, because in linear reality and force, it does take time. Mm-hmm. But as you train this skill, right, we're working at the level of power, the level of creativity, which is instantaneous.
Yes.
And so like, I've told stories on my own show or other people's show about experience I had in the SEALs where, I was in extreme risk. And because of my training, part Zen, part Navy SEAL training, everything came to this still point where suddenly time became meaningless, and I had all the time in the world to work the problem.
Wow.
And I did, and I survived every single situation. But if you were to actually watch it from the outside, it was happening like so fast.
Yes.
But in my internal experience, it was extremely slow, and it's a flow state. So what I'm suggesting here is this practice of developing this mindful awareness leads your mind to operate in that present moment where everything happens at the speed of instantaneousness.
Yes.
And time then becomes something that you have at first the limited ability to control, but it's really not something you're actively controlling. It's just because the experience is happening in this present moment, and your attention is collapsed in this moment, then the mind stops experiencing time as slowly and stretched out as it does. Because time is a construct of the mind, just like money is a construct of the mind, just like Texas is a construct of the mind, and the idea of Matt or Mark is a construct.
Yes. Yeah, you're making me think of those experiences where time slows. And in particular, I always think of, just because I'm a baseball player, I remember there were certain swings I would take that it was like I felt like I wasn't swinging, or I certainly wasn't swinging hard.
Right.
It felt like in that moment, and everything slowed, and the ball looked a little bit bigger, but it was just like I sliced through the baseball.
Right.
And I didn't feel it.
And when you hit it, you knew it was a home run, but it was
the time concept was like,
right.
So odd, where you're just like, whoa, like that felt like almost too fluid. And you look up, the ball's wherever it needs to go, and way further than you thought it was going to go. And I think it's so cool to start from that place. Right. And I recall at that moment, I mean, because I had practiced, because I had prepared, all those sorts of things, but it took time to get to that point where I felt that and experienced that. And
right.
I did it once, and I wanted it again.
Athletes and martial artists, they experience it because they practice for thousands and thousands of hours. You've heard the 10,000 rule of Malcolm Gladwell. I'm suggesting that you can also practice just in the mind. And I'm not talking about practicing a skill like swinging a baseball bat or a golf club. You're practicing the skill of being radically present and watching your thoughts as if from a distance.
Yes.
And I'm not suggesting that you're trying to stop thinking, because that's a fool's errand. Mm-hmm. You're just de-energizing and decoupling from the thoughts until they are over there or out there, and you get to choose what to do with it.
Yes.
And the more you develop the skill, the more you choose just to let it float on by. And this is why masters don't talk a whole lot. They don't need to engage with the constant chatter and second order of thinking, the judging and the opinions, and the things happen. Interesting. If it requires a response will be there. Right.
That's so good. Well, I think too that we learned so much from martial arts, and I think for those listening, I think searching up, and I'll do it too, but on the box breathing and checking out some of your resources, Mark, too, is a fabulous way to start and integrate it into what you do in the morning.
Yeah, that's the master practice right there. The box breathing, again, built on top of all the other stuff that we know we need to do.
Yes.
Right. We know we need to exercise. We know we need to move our body effectively and stretch it and develop durability. We know we need to sleep 7 to 8 hours a day, high quality sleep. We know we need to eat close to the earth, eat less, intermittent fast, high quality foods, right? This is just like these things we know, and people treat it like some master skill. Like I'm doing, I'm going to do this latest challenge and that challenge. No, just do those simple principles. Eat high quality foods, eat less, intermittent fast, move your body every day in a lot of functional variety, hard, medium, and soft, right? Get your 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, get outside and spend time in nature, get that early morning sunshine. You just do it. right? It's not rocket science. And that gives you the foundation of optimal balance and health.
Yes.
From which you then layer on the box breathing practice. You don't have to wait, but
Yes.
box breathing practice then really takes hold. And I mentioned just focusing on the breathing pattern develops those 3 master skills: arousal control, attention control, and concentration. And from there, if you work on all those for 6 months, you will naturally be ready to develop the bubble, the mindful awareness.
Yes. Yeah. So I love asking this question because you seem like, and I know this is true, one of the most disciplined individuals I've come across.
Yeah.
And I think maybe not, but
it depends on whose standard you're talking about. Yeah, I'm extraordinarily disciplined.
To the Mark Divine
I train every day.
So.
Everything I just described, I do effortlessly.
So this is, I think,
but there's other things that I do that you can be like, man, you could be more disciplined.
No,
like I like to have some red wine here and there. Not there's a few things that were conditioned in an early age, which it's like it doesn't matter how advanced you are. They some of those things still stay with you. It's like a a fan. When you unplug a fan, it still spins for a while.
That's a good point. That's why I love coffee. So whenever I grab that next cup, and I'm probably, I probably shouldn't have this, but I'm sure there's a study out there that tells me that another cup of coffee won't hurt. But if you like it,
don't worry about it. If it's interfering with life, that's my thing. I like coffee, but I only drink about a half a cup of it. It's the idea of coffee that I like.
Yes. Yes.
And I love the idea of having a glass of wine at sunset with my wife.
Yes.
Overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Like, that's a beautiful moment. So why not enjoy it?
Yes.
Now, it would be a problem if I was down in 2 bottles a night, and getting up in the morning to work it out of my system. Not to say I haven't done that before.
Right. No judgment over here, Mark. No judgment. You remind me of life. Sometimes we try to force things so hard, and instead of like that enjoyment piece. I remember when I lived in Switzerland, when I was in public accounting at this time, I was talking with one of my Swiss colleagues, and I had a coffee in the morning, and then it was after lunch. I'm like, I really want a coffee, but I don't know if I should. And I still remember this day. He looked at me, he goes, Matt, if you want to have a coffee.
Yeah.
Cause you'll enjoy it. And that's a beautiful thing. And I wasn't drinking 18 cups a day, but I always remember that stuck out of like, well, enjoy it. It's like, God, this is a cool moment.
You don't need to do violence to yourself to also optimize yourself, right? Everything in moderation, including moderation. I've spent time in Zen monasteries, and some of the most miserable people I've ever met in my life were some of those monks who went full austerity.
Oh, true. I love that. Everything in moderation, including moderation. That's a great quote. But, how do you, because I think a lot of people struggle with this, right? I struggle with this sometimes too, of when we get to those moments of like, I know I should do those things, right? And there's a balance to it and everything in moderation to that point, but you're so highly disciplined with some of you've made these things non-negotiable. And it's second nature probably at this point, but the things that you should do, because we all struggle with like, oh, darn it, missed it again. And I was talking to a group of high school students yesterday, actually, a baseball team, and we're talking about identifying things like doing small things consistently, but how do we be consistent? And so moment by moment, these young boys are going to have to make a choice of, am I doing the extra swings after practice or am I not? Am I doing the extra fly balls or am I not? How do you work through and maintain your discipline on the things that matter, and where it's just not even a question almost for you? How do you teach discipline?
Well, that's a great question. There's so many ways I could answer this, but discipline means to be a disciple to something higher than your ego's needs or your desire of the moment. And so for me, I'm a disciple to source, to God's energy, right? And so I'm not a religious person, though. I don't need religion to be a disciple to source or God's energy, right? Whatever you want to call it. Because it is all of us, right? It's an aspect of all of us, if not the totality of all of us, if you allow it to be. And so I work toward removing obstacles. And I recognize that some of the biggest obstacles to allowing source to flourish or to flow through you in copious quantities are some of the most pleasurable things that have a temporary stamp on them. Alcohol consumption, smoking, things that lead to the addictions.
Yes.
Even sex and everything like in those kind of 7 deadly sins category.
Yes.
I recognize that because of my practice that, first of all, at a very deep spiritual level, we're born into this world into suffering. The moment we're born, we are fighting for survival and for significance.
Yes.
And it's painful. It's suffering. That's what the Buddha said. Life is suffering. Dukkha.
Yes.
And so pleasure is really something that we constantly seek as a salve to the pain and suffering. So another great quote is between the banks of pleasure and pain, this life flows. So you're not going to avoid that. Your body, the body and its conditioning, because we're in this 3D realm, is always going to be bouncing between pain and pleasure, and pain is actually the background. So you've got to be careful about overdoing the pleasure because it gets you right back into the pain category, and oftentimes more acute than where you started.
Yes.
The hangover is way more uncomfortable than the discomfort that led you to pick up the drink to begin with. So I've learned that, back to moderation, that it's okay to have some pleasures as long as they aren't going to lead to greater pain to myself or others. Now, I saw how overdoing alcohol could lead to a lot of pain for people in my own family. Right. And so I could have gone all in on, I'm a non-drinker or I'm an alcoholic. I don't like any of these. I don't like personally labels.
Yes.
Yeah. But could I have gone down the path of overdoing it with alcohol? Did I? Yeah. When I was younger, even in the SEALs with that kind of hard drinking, hard work, hard play culture.
Yes.
But I recognized through my practice that was actually would induce more suffering in the long run. And so to find, to moderate that, tuck it in.
Yeah.
But don't do violence if you enjoy, if I like coffee, have a cup of coffee or have a cup of coffee. Just don't have 5.
Yes.
If you want to have a glass of wine, have a glass of wine, but just don't drink 2 bottles, right?
Yes.
That kind of thing. So there's this kind of first, be a disciple to something bigger, do no harm, right? To include doing no harm to yourself. And then first, discipline yourself to do the healthy things and fill up your life with that, fill up your mind. I call that feeding the courage wolf with the healthy things.
Yes.
Don't miss exercise every day. Even if it's a day off, you're going to take a walk or you're going to do your yoga asanas, right? You're going to get out and breathe and play with your dog, right? You're always moving. There should be no sitting on the couch except to watch Super Bowl, maybe. Which is the only sporting event I watch in my entire year. That's it. Yeah, believe it or not. Because I'm too busy doing other healthy things. Or I should say healthy things. I'm not saying that watching football isn't unhealthy, but it's not as healthy as playing football.
That's a very good point.
So get out and play football. Anyway, so
that's a very good point.
When you put your attention on healthy and positive things and healthy and positive people, then you're developing, that positive momentum. You're developing your mind to be positive. You're developing your body to be really healthy and balanced and to enjoy feeling good.
Yes.
And so what happens there is then you just find yourself less interested in the unhealthy things and they begin to fall off. Simultaneously, so that's what I call starving fear by feeding courage, right? So you put your mind on all these positive things and you don't give attention to the negative things, and eventually the energy of those negative things diminishes until it has no effect over you. But if it does have effect over you, let's say you did grow up in an addiction environment, kind of like I did, or whatever, you find yourself, being drawn toward, those unhealthy things.
Yes.
then simultaneously you can use kind of like atomic habits principles, my friend James Clear, to really set up a process so that instead of moving toward those things, you move toward something else that's more healthy. Right? So this requires you to be aware of the moments and the things that trigger you to want to take the drink, or to want to go to Pornhub.com, or to want to, have that 6th cup of coffee, or the 3rd cup of coffee, whatever it is.
Right.
Or to grab the fudge brownie instead of the apple.
Yes.
And to recognize those moments that you're triggered, or those situations you get triggered, or the emotional events that trigger you to those, and to insert something else at that moment. And I'm saying, it doesn't mean you can't ever have a fudge brownie.
Right.
But at that moment where you're triggered, or where the desire is going to arise, or it has arisen, you just do something else in place of that first.
Yeah. Yes.
You have a half piece of apple, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I don't really want the fudge brownie anymore.
True. Very true.
Right? You want a second glass of wine, have a glass of water instead. And suddenly you're probably like, you know what? I was actually thirsty. It wasn't really the glass of wine that I needed. You know what I'm saying? So that's a really powerful way to kind of like, through cognitive behavioral therapy approach, to remove the negative while you simultaneously focus on feeding the courage wolf and developing the positive momentum around, healthy things.
That's so good. So good. You got me thinking over here, Mark. This is a good thing. I hope listeners are thinking too.
Does that not happen very often?
No. I'm too busy, Mark, to think.
You're too busy
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
Declutter, dude. Come on.
Got too much going on in the business. No, I think it's I'm blown away. You remind me of one of my prior guests. He actually was he's ex-military. He was a Marine, and then in the car business for a long time, martial arts background. He went back at age. The one thing he didn't complete, Mark, in his life was getting his black belt. Mm-hmm. And so I kid you not, at 75 years old, he's one of the most ripped guys I know.
Nice.
Works out like 3-4 hours a day. It's incredible to this day.
That's awesome.
He went back at 75 and got his black belt in, it was like 18 months, 20 months, something like that. And like legit worked his behind off and got it done. And it was incredible to see. Cool. I think there's something special about the discipline and the thoughtfulness that comes with, not only martial arts, but military and life experience. And that I get to experience with this gentleman named Leo, who was on the podcast as well. And then you, and just to be able to learn and take certain things back from my life. And I hope the listeners are doing the same thing, of like taking these practices like box breathing and understanding the ego and just paying attention to some of that stuff and working on it and letting it fade away. And then I love that whole just replacing, like focusing on filling the courage bowl and like focusing on that first, right? And that preparation for is just like the critical piece, right? But just coming back again and again and again. And I think my favorite quote of today was, everything in moderation, including moderation, right? And I don't know if you have crumble cookies down in California, but those cookies are getting big. So I only have one, but man, they're big. But it's delicious. But I only have one. So,
I don't think I've had those. You have to send me a box.
Yeah, sure.
One of them, maybe.
One of them, yeah. They're fairly big. But no, I absolutely enjoyed that. I love this conversation, and I want to be aware of time. And I've got so many other questions that we could dive into and ask and really unpack. But this is just amazing. And I want one last question, because I want to make sure, obviously we'll have links to all the show notes, and I want people to connect with you. But do you mind just spending a little bit of time just talking about how listeners can connect with you and just resources they can take advantage of with all the things that you're up to?
Sure. My podcast is the Mark Divine Show. I have great guests too. It's fun. I have great conversations. Unbeatablemind.com is where I kind of unpack some of the mental training. So if you can go there or send us a note at info@Unbeatable Mind, and we'll guide you toward our online training. And we have a community, very reasonably priced, but it's the whole Unbeatable Mind system is everything that I started teaching it to the SEALs, and then I've evolved it from there. It's the whole operating system on how to train your mind. And 5 mountain training, we all have physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual, but training all that as an integrated whole to find wholeness, to find, this level of awareness that is just uncommon. In fact, my next book coming out is titled Uncommon. It comes out July 15th or something. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. And if someone's really interested in the hardcore, like real test, you're aware of SEALFIT, SEALFIT.com. We have crucibles, which are like modeled after Navy SEAL Hell Week. We do 6 hours, which are kind of fun, do it with your kid type of thing. Not young kid, but like we have father, son, and mother, daughter teams that go. But
That's awesome.
Then it starts getting real hard around the 12-hour, and then we do a 24-hour, and then the real granddaddy is called Kokoro. It's 50 hours of nonstop physical, mental, emotional, spiritual training. No sleep, round the clock. It's the real deal. It's just incredible transformation experience. So if anyone's out there, we've got a bunch of athletes and coaches who are looking through, and we've had a ton of real elite level athletes and CrossFitters, and you'll be standing besides elite CrossFitters and Navy SEAL trainees and world champion ultra runners and triathletes, all seeking to improve themselves, challenge themselves. It's considered the hardest training in the world outside of the Navy SEALs.
Yes.
It's no joke. SEALFIT.com. Check that out.
Oh, I love that.
And if you're looking for any gear to train with, this, I am now on bruteforcetraining.com for weighted rucking and weight vests and race rucks and sandbags. So the best gear made in the country. It's all USA made. It's just incredibly high quality. So if you've heard about moving under load with a weight vest or a weighted ruck and its value, right, for developing bone mass and core strength and mental toughness, you got to get on board with that. So you can go get some gear at bruteforcetraining.com.
I love it. I was checking out the sandbags before we got on.
Yeah.
Today. There's no joke. Yeah, go run around with a sandbag in your arms or on your shoulders or something like that.
We're releasing a new product in a week or two that we developed first for the Air Force. We're calling it the Go Bag. And the Go Bag is a ruggedized sandbag that you can drag, because the Air Force had one of their fitness test items is to drag a weighted sandbag, for like 100 meters. So It's got a drag strap that you hook up and you can drag it. It's got 2 straps that we call grunt straps, where you can strap it up and throw it on your back and use it as a rucksack, or you can just carry it to, wherever you're going to train. And then inside the bag, Matt, for weight are 2 sandbag kettlebells. So you just unzip the bag, open it up, and you got 2 more pieces of gear to work with.
Oh,
so
that's
literally
cool.
This Go Bag has, hundreds and hundreds of exercises you could do with one single piece of gear. That's pretty cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Hidden kettlebells within the
sandbag.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, I didn't know the Air Force did that.
Yeah, they've got this funky functional fitness test that uses sandbags and sandbag kettlebells. So we're going to supply them with gear. Yeah.
The Navy SEALs are just shaking their heads like, why?
Totally.
Kidding.
Honestly, it's smarter than just push-ups, sit-ups, squats, pull-ups and run. At least it's functional fitness.
Good point. Oh my gosh. Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough. And it's just always such a pleasure. And I got to get out to California one of these days and look over the Pacific Ocean, have a glass of wine, and do maybe another podcast and just hang out.
Yeah, after you do Kokoro camp.
True. I got to prepare myself for that. I think Indeed. I'd be ringing the bell pretty quick at this point.
No, come on. You got it.
That's awesome. But to all the listeners, please go check out the links, connect with Mark. He's just doing amazing things and just an amazing individual focused on others, and you can learn a lot from him. So please go check out the links. And Mark, I can't wait absolutely to the next one.
Yeah, this has been great fun. Thank you very much, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks,
Appreciate
Mark.
you. Hoo-yah.
Thank you for joining us today on the Matt Phillips Podcast. If you are like us, we know that you are here to do great things, to become the sales leader that makes things happen and drives big time sales results. We know you have that big vision, and we are here to help get you where you want to go. We're here to help you develop that unstoppable, rock solid leadership skill set and help you train to master the one true differentiator, mental toughness. We would love to be part of your journey. So if you are ready, head over to mattphillipscoaching.com and check out the ways that we can help. As always, please share this episode and make sure you subscribe by clicking the button below. Thank you again. And now, go crush the day.